Good afternoon, everyone. We will now call the April 15th, 2025 board meeting to order. Madam General Counsel, would you please call the roll?
Representing Educational District 1, Ms. Katie Howard.
Present.
Representing Educational District 2, Ms. Loretta Bolden. Representing Educational District 3, Dr. Ken Zeff.
Present.
Representing Educational District 4 and Board Vice Chair, Ms. Jennifer McDonald.
Present.
Representing Educational District 5 and Board Chair, Ms. Erica Mitchell.
Present.
Representing Educational District 6, Mr. Tolton Pace.
Present.
Representing Educational District 7 at-large seat 7, Mr. Alfred Chavy Brooks.
Present.
Representing Educational District at-large seat 8, Ms. Cynthia Briscoe Brown.
Present.
Representing Educational District at-large seat 9, Ms. Jessica Johnson.
Present.
Madam Chair, you have a quorum.
Thank you. I will now entertain a motion to approve the minutes from the special call meeting on March 20th, 2025 and March 27th, 2025. I have a motion. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Moved by Board Member Briscoe Brown.
Second.
Second by Vice Chair McDonald. It has, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Now we entertain a motion to approve the March 3rd, 2025 meeting minutes.
So moved.
Moved by Board Member Briscoe Brown,
Second.
second by Board Member Brooks. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Is there a motion to approve the agenda for April 15th, 2025 board meeting?
So moved.
Second.
Who moved it? Cynthia and Tolton. Okay. Moved by Board Member Briscoe Brown, second by Board Member Tolton Pace. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Welcome back from spring break, everyone. Before
No.
we dive in, I just want to say,
No.
welcome
Not
back.
yet. Yeah.
I hope you all had a wonderful and safe spring break. With that being said, Dr. Johnson, would you please bring the work session items?
Absolutely. Thank you, Madam Chair. Today, we have 4 presentations. Our first presentation will provide an update on the Office of Charter and Partner Schools by Mr. Matt Underwood. Our second presentation is an update on exceptional education by Dr. Shatina Love. Our third presentation is the monthly financial update by Dr. Lisa Bracken. And our final presentation will be student outcome focused governance. And this month we'll focus on interim goals 3.1 and 3.2. Mr. Underwood.
Good afternoon, Dr. Johnson, Chair Mitchell, and members of the Board of Education. I can never get the height on this thing right. Yes, my name is Matt Underwood. I'm the Executive Director of the Office of Charter and Partner Schools here in Atlanta Public Schools. Appreciate the opportunity to speak with you this afternoon to give you an update both about the work of our office here at APS as well as an update on the state of charter and partner schools here in the Atlanta Public Schools relative to the contracts that they hold with APS. So our team in the Office of Charter and Partner Schools works to support and monitor the 24 charter and partner schools Atlanta Public Schools has authorized. Our primary function, obviously, is monitoring schools to ensure their compliance with their contractual obligations. You can see some examples of that monitoring that we do listed here on this slide. But we also provide support to help those schools to carry out their missions and service to the students and families that they serve. Examples of support listed there. I want to highlight in particular the buyback services program that allows our APS charter and partner schools to leverage district resources, buy them back to support the operations of their school. And then lastly, collaboration to serve as a vehicle and mechanism to foster collaboration between the district and charter and partner schools. And you'll hear an example at the end of the presentation today of something new this year that I think really speaks to that. You can learn a lot more about the work of our team, the Office of Charter and Partner Schools, on our website. Also want to acknowledge and appreciate the support of the Office of Charter and Partner Schools here in the audience today. They do great work. They're I would say, the envy of a lot of district authorizers here in Georgia who are often reaching out to them to ask how we do things here in APS. So I appreciate their work as our team. All right, so here on this slide, you'll see the current demographic profile for the district's charter and partner schools. This was taken from Infinite Campus last month, so that's pretty recent, pretty up to date. On average, because they draw students from across APS, charter schools generally reflect the demographics of the district as a whole. I do want to point out, I think it's somewhat notable that the percentage of students from economically disadvantaged backgrounds attending APS charter schools has increased by just about 15% over the past 4 years. That's driven in large part by those charter schools' use of weighted admissions lotteries, that give additional weight to students who qualify as economically disadvantaged. Partner schools, for the most part, match the demographics of the clusters they serve, given that they serve a defined attendance zone as determined by the district. All right, well, I'm going to do a deeper dive into the state of charter schools here in APS. Currently, we've got 19 charter schools in the Atlanta Public Schools operating. That's about 20% of the district's overall enrollment that is enrolled in an APS charter school. The slide you see here shows the current enrollment level of each charter school and the grade range they serve, as well as the enrollment cap defined in their charter contracts. All of the schools are below their charter contracts. Most are pretty close to the cap that's in their charter contract. As I mentioned earlier, the Office of Charter and Partner Schools monitors the performance of charter schools relative to the terms in their contracts, and we use a monitoring and performance framework that's aligned to the metrics and goals that are in those contracts to annually evaluate each charter school. Within the domains of academics, school climate, finance, operations, and governance, there are a range of indicators and measures that are used, and those are summarized here. All of those feed into a overall annual performance report that we put together and publish on our website. It's also included as an attachment to this presentation in Simbly. So again, the complete report, and it's linked at the bottom of the slide here. You can find a lot more detail, but this is a high-level summary of each school's performance that's pulled from that report. 10 of the district's charter schools met all of the measurable standards across all domains in the 2023-24 school year. You can see that here on this slide. 9 of our charter schools did not meet or were approaching standards within the academic and or operational performance domains. I'm going to go a little bit more deeply into those 9 schools and the areas where they were not meeting standards. So of those 9 schools, for most of them, it was a function of being placed on or remaining on one of the Georgia Department of Education support and improvement lists. That's the Comprehensive Support and Improvement, Targeted Support Improvement, CSI, ATSI, TSI lists. Those schools didn't meet academic standards. Many of them did see improvement from the prior year on other CCRPI-related metrics. And then for a little bit further context, I've included on this slide and the next one, the 2024 CCRPI Content Mastery and Progress domain scores. To meet academic performance standards under the terms of a charter contract, a charter school has to either move closer to its own school's individual score, move that score closer to 100, perform better than the district average, and or perform better than the district majority comparison school that students attending that charter school otherwise would attend if they weren't attending that charter school, and meeting that in either the content mastery and or progress domains. And so you can see, and it's maybe a little challenging, it's 2 different images here just in order to fit all of the schools and their different grade bands here. So this is all charter schools that all across all grade bands for content mastery. And then the next slide is all charter schools and the grade bands they served on the progress measure. So between those 2 measures, schools, in order to meet standards, either have to improve in their own individual score relative to the prior year, perform higher than the district average, and or perform better than the district majority comparison schools. That's the school that the majority of students would otherwise attend if they weren't attending that charter school. And the 10 charter schools on the earlier slide that all met in academics each hit 1 or more of these targets in the 23-24 school year. All right, so, excuse me, flipped ahead here. So as you're aware, charter schools receive a high degree of autonomy in exchange for accountability in meeting those performance goals in their charter contracts, and therefore there are potential consequences for schools who don't meet those standards. Over the past year, the district administration has recommended and the APS Board of Education has approved conditional performance periods for 3 charter school operators here in APS. In 2024, Centennial Academy and KIPP Atlanta schools were each granted conditional charter renewals that stipulate if their schools remain on the state's support and improvement list at the next recalculation in 2026, those schools' charters may possibly face early termination. And then earlier this year, the Condesi schools were granted by the APS board a 2-year charter contract extension to allow the district further time to evaluate Condesi's charter performance and the status on the state's charter, state support and improvement list in 2027. Those conditions will be considered when determining whether to fully renew Kendesi's charter at that time. And then on this next slide, you can see those performance notes for Centennial, KIPP, and Kendesi that I just mentioned, along with the charter contract term length for each APS charter organization. The next two slides present a brief bit of information and data related to Apply APS Charter, which is a centralized new student admissions application platform that 6 out of the 8 APS Charter organizations currently opt into. This platform was developed by the Office of Charter and Partner Schools in collaboration with our district's charter schools back in 2020 to bring better transparency, efficiency, and equity into the charter school admissions process. You can learn a lot more about this at applyapscharter.org. In the application cycle that just ended at the end of February, there were a little over 4,000 new student applications that were submitted to schools participating in Apply APS Charter. Applications were submitted from all across the district, with the highest number of applications received from households in the zip codes you see highlighted here on this map of the district. And because most schools and grade levels received more applications than spaces available, following that common admissions lottery last month, for about every 1 application that received an offer, another 3 applications were placed on one of these schools' wait lists. Shifting gears here to the new startup charter petition process. State law requires that every local school district adopt a policy and process for applicants to submit new startup charter applications for consideration. This year, APS has received 1 application from an applicant called the Academy for Innovation in Medicine, which is seeking to open a new 6th through 12th grade charter school in APS in the 26-27 school year. So following a period of review by a team of internal and external reviewers, a recommendation on action for this application would be brought to the board no earlier than the June 2025 board meeting, in accordance with state guidelines on the timeline for petition review. So this slide shares a brief summary of data related to the State Charter Schools Commission, which is an entity separate from APS, but it's also able to approve charter schools that have either been denied by a local school district or that have a multi-district attendance zone, and can therefore serve students who would be zoned for an APS school. So as of October 2024, there are a little over 1,100 students who were zoned for Atlanta Public Schools, but chose instead to attend one of 14 different commission-approved charter schools that you can see named here on this slide. Also highlighted at the bottom of the slide, there are 2 new commission charter schools that are slated to open next school year that have APS defined in their attendance zone. That's the Movement School of South Fulton and Cherokee Classical Academy. All right, moving on now from charter schools, turn our attention to the district's partner schools. As a reminder, these are previously district-run neighborhood schools whose historical CCRPI performance led the district in 2016 to select partner organizations to operate the schools in order to improve outcomes for students. There's 3 partner organizations that currently operate 5 partner schools in Atlanta Public Schools. Slater Elementary, Price Middle, and Carver STEAM Academy are all operated by Purpose-Built Schools Atlanta. Gideon's Elementary by the Kendesi Schools, and Woodson Park Academy is operated by KIPP Atlanta Schools. These schools serve defined neighborhood attendance zones and must follow certain APS policies, such as enrollment, transportation, and student discipline. Like with charter schools, our team also evaluates APS partner schools using a performance framework that's tied to the goals and requirements of the partner agreements that these organizations have with APS. Though the frameworks are similar, there are some key differences, specifically in the academic and governance domains, that reflect the unique components of partner agreements. This is a high-level summary that, again, it's drawn from that annual performance report that's included as attachment with this presentation. You can see in the 23-24 school year that Slater Elementary, Price Middle, and Woodson Park Academy each met standards on all performance indicators, while Gideon's and Carver STEAM met on almost all indicators. It's a closer look on those areas where those schools were approaching standards. Gideon's Elementary fell just short of meeting its challenge index target, which measures the school's performance on the Georgia Milestones assessments relative to the school's student poverty rate. The school also had an employee credentialing finding that it corrected. And Carver STEAM Academy missed the posting of certain required Go Team meeting documentation on its website. Therefore, the school received an approaching standards in the governance indicator. Partner elementary and middle schools' academic performance goals, as I mentioned a moment ago, are tied to the district's challenge index, which shows how the schools perform on Georgia milestones relative to the number of students living in poverty and the number of English language learners. You can see the partner elementary and middle schools highlighted on this challenge index graph here. The high school level, Carver STEAM Academy is the only partner high school. Its academic performance goal is related to hitting a graduation rate target. And the school has met its initial target of a 75% graduation rate for each of the past 4 years. And finally, for this last section, I'd like to highlight a new initiative that we launched this year, a charter partner district-run school collaboration grant. During the initial application cycle last spring, at least one district-run school and at least one charter partner school could team up on an application seeking funding for a meaningful collaborative project that was aligned to one or more of the APL's goals and guardrails that would improve teaching and learning in a measurable way, and that at the end of the project, the results from which could be disseminated to a broader audience. And this year, and I'll invite them up now, because they're going to share briefly about this work. We've got Humphreys Elementary School and Atlanta Neighborhood Charter School that have teamed up under one grant, and the Kendesi Schools, who's working with Finch Elementary School and Hope Hill Elementary School under another grant. And they're already here. Have them share briefly with you the work that they've been doing this year.
Good afternoon. I'm Nicole Lupo. I work as the kindergarten through 8th grade school farm specialist at Atlanta Neighborhood Charter School. And I've had the deep pleasure of partnering with my colleague across the neighborhood, Shakita Lanier, at Humphreys Elementary School. This year, we developed a two-pronged approach to utilizing our grant. First, we developed a 6-part workshop series for 5 teachers from ANCS and 5 from Humphreys to collaborate on learning more from each other about how to grow food on campus and to incorporate that work into the core curriculum. We have also been working with second graders across both schools. Humphreys specializes in growing food hydroponically, and our school, ANCS, specializes in growing food in ground. So our students are teaching each other about best practices on how to do that by creating digital books. We'll be celebrating our learning together with a field trip next week on Wednesday to Price Middle School. There will be about 100 second graders and about 15 adults gathering at Price to learn more about the role of pollinators in food production and the vital work that we are all learning how to do to grow food in an urban environment.
Good afternoon. It's so wonderful to be here. Matt, thank you for saving space for me today. My name is Dr. Tracy Brinson, and I am the Director of STEAM Implementation at all 3 of the Kendesi schools. And I had the overwhelming, wonderful pleasure of working with Hope Hill, who partnered with Kendesi 04th Ward, and then Kendesi Gideons, who partnered with Finch Elementary as well. At Finch, we are currently working on an art exhibition for our K2 students who will be integrating art within the science standards. So that kind of looks like learning about day and night, what does sound and light look like, the life cycle of animals, all through art. We're looking forward to our community coming and sharing that space with us as well. And then we had at 04th Ward and Hope Hill the wonderful opportunity to do a playground investigation. Our 4th graders were learning about simple machines, force of motion, geometrical shapes. So we visited 3 different playgrounds in the Atlanta area to look at how the playgrounds can be more equitable, more inclusive for all students. And then their task was to come back to the classroom and build those models, and then they will be presenting them to the community on how we can make our playgrounds more accessible, sustainable, and inclusive for all students. Thank you so much for my time.
All right. So that's the end of the main presentation. There is some additional information in the appendix. So at this time, happy to answer any questions you may have, and as well as for our grantees here as well. Thanks.
Thank you. And do we have any questions? I'll start to my right, Board Member Howard, and then Board Member Dr. Zaff, Board Member Johnson as well.
Thank you so much for the presentation, and I have two questions, but before, I want to say how awesome I think the partnership is in those two projects. Of course, ANCS, Sonoma Board of Education District, so I went over there recently, and they were talking a lot about the partnership with Humphreys, and it's awesome to see what's literally growing out of that, and I'm definitely going to stop by on the field trip at Price next week. So I want to definitely celebrate the sharing of best practices, because that is the point of charters and partners. And working with traditional schools. So to my questions, at the beginning of the presentation, you mentioned comparison of students at a charter with the performance of, I guess, the zone school for that school. How is that done? Is that done based on students? Because if it's a citywide charter, what does that look like?
Yes, yeah. So what we look at is the majority school that students would otherwise attend, because even though charter schools are open citywide, the vast majority of them tend to draw, not surprisingly, right around the geographic area of the actual physical campus. But we're looking at the school where 50% or more of students would attend otherwise, and most all of our charter schools have that. So, for example, Atlanta Neighborhood Charter School that you just mentioned, the majority of students who are zoned there would otherwise have attended either Parkside at the elementary level or King Middle School, and looking at the performance relative to those schools as well, and content mastery and progress.
That helps. So it obviously can depend on kind of where students are coming from, because some schools like Wesley may have a broader citywide goal than ANCS, which
Right.
has a different tier of kind of area where kids come from.
That's right.
But that's helpful, so
Yeah.
thank you for that.
Yeah.
And then going to, I think it's slide 23, with the bar line and the dots above and below.
Yeah.
I know you were saying something about Carver's, thank you, 22, pardon me, thank you, Retta, about Carver's STEAM, so going to partner. Could you repeat what you said, I think, about around their graduation rate?
Yeah, so the Carver STEAM is the only partner high school, so isn't featured on this slide. These are elementary and middle schools. Their academic performance goal in the partner agreement is related to their graduation rate. It is to hit an initial target of a 75% graduation rate by 5 years after the partner agreement was established, which they hit and have maintained since that time. The next graduation rate target there to hit is an 82% graduation rate. And then ultimately, by the end of the partner agreement in the final years, it's to be at a 90% graduation rate or higher.
So when is it, you said 82, when is that by?
82 would be in 2 more years.
Okay.
Mhm.
And then a little follow-up to that, I think I saw in the exceptional education presentation with Carver STEAM being on the TSI list. I can ask about that in the next presentation. But on this, and looking at evaluation here, are they on a state designated list right now, Carver STEAM?
Carver STEAM, yes, recently the TSI designation, that each of the partner schools had, upon inception as a partner school, been on the comprehensive support and improvement list, and many of them have fallen off. A couple of them have been back on the targeted support and improvement list. That isn't something that we have as an accountability goal, different from the charter schools, because the partner schools were brought on as partner schools to turn around what had historically been underperforming schools. So sort of a little different starting point, but all of those schools began on the CSI list and have since worked their way either off or to a quote unquote lower list.
I saw they came off in 2022
That's
for
right.
CSI, and
Yeah.
then I can ask questions with the exceptional education. president.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you for this presentation, Mr. Underwood, and thank you for all the support you provide charters. It seems like there's a lot of interest, a lot of collaboration. I want to pick up on, actually, since you have the slides up there, on slide 33, which I think is the similar slide to this. Thank you, Board Member
Okay.
Howard. This, to me, is the slide that tells us the story, a lot about the story. So if I'm reading, you tell me if I got this right. So we're mapping all of our elementary and middle schools, the district-run schools here and the charter schools, and the line that you're drawing down from the top left to the bottom right is the predictive performance of those schools. And naturally, unfortunately in America, the higher poverty rate you have, the lower performance you see. The the Bolden dots are our charter school partners. So I count 4 above the line and all the rest below the line. So that gives me pause, because when most of these authorizes or when most of these petitions came forward, I suspect it was the argument that was they would be substantially above the line. Help me understand what can we do to support, or what options does the board have, or or your office, what do we need to do to get those dots above the line? Because if they're just replicating dots that we already have, or even below the dots we have, we're just dividing resources. That's the argument against. Help me understand what can be done to improve performance.
Sure, yeah. And I do want to point out, too, that the reason why this particular slide's in the appendix is this is not, the challenge index is not a measure that's in charter contracts currently, so tried to stick to those accountability metrics that are in charter contracts in the main presentation, and why this one is in the appendix, as opposed to the partner school agreements, which has that as a direct part of their accountability measures. For the charter schools and performance relative to the challenge index, or I guess a somewhat similar slide, if I can go back here as well, slightly different would be the CCRPI progress component, which is looking at progress relative, and even more so the closing gaps measure as well. One of the things that we want to look at is how do we measure not just straight up achievement relative to content mastery, for example, but also how our schools performing relative to demographic subgroups, making progress, closing gaps, et cetera. I think ultimately the support, the agreement that is made with charter schools is that they will meet high standards in exchange for flexibility and autonomy. We leverage district resources to provide support where charter schools want and need and ask for it. I do think ultimately the performance accountability is on the schools themselves. So I wouldn't say that there's anything necessarily more or less as a district we could or should be doing for charter schools and also obviously pointing out this is 1 year's worth of data that we're looking at here. We can, in the annual report, show that performance over time. But I think can provide additional support if and when a charter school wants it. But ultimately, I guess the short answer is it's really on the school. That's why they have that charter contract.
So I'm hearing accountability in exchange for flexibility, and you mentioned over time. When I've looked at the chart, it hasn't really moved over the past few years. Is that your assessment that the vast majority of our charts are still below the line
on the challenge index measure? Yes, yeah, I would say so.
All right.
Yeah.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. I was just curious, the 2 new state authorized charter schools, I see one is in South Fulton. Can you share, I guess, the clusters or zip codes where that would be impacted by possible attendance at those schools?
I don't know that these are schools that are slated to open this fall. I don't know that they've got definitive locations as of yet. The Move-In School of South Fulton, I would say, would be the one that probably would be most likely to possibly draw some APS students. I don't know. The trek to Cherokee County is one that a lot of APS students would make. But I can find out that information once it's confirmed and let you all know where the actual physical location of the school would be.
Sure, thank you.
Bolden?
I'll go after.
Oh, okay. I didn't know you said yes or no.
No, I didn't. I was like, oh, it's me. It's all good.
Perfect, because I want to jump back on Ken's question because I don't quite have clarity on what we as a board can do in terms of accountability when it comes to looking at the challenge index, looking at the performance, and then even the fact, and I believe, someone please correct me if I'm wrong, this new promise school list that charter schools can't even appear on, even if their numbers are comparable. So I'm just trying to figure out what accountability we have within this space, or what can we do to hold them accountable within this space, aside from contract renewals. What space do we have in the middle of contracts?
Yeah, so I guess this doesn't necessarily go into all the detail, but in the charter contracts, which are for charter schools, it's a three-way contract between the school, the district, and the state. And so charter contract language looks the same across the state because the DOE is a third party to that contract, and the goals are ones that are derived from district-administered assessments, state-administered assessments, state measures like CCRPI and graduation rate, which is why something like the Challenge Index, which is an APS measure, isn't something that would be included. As you mentioned, the primary vehicle to hold schools accountable is every 5 years. Their contract comes before the board to be voted on for renewal. And if a school has not met its performance standards, then it's a decision as to whether or not to continue to allow that school to operate. In that interim period before contract renewal, we do have mechanisms whereby if a school is not meeting standards on an indicator, has, even outside of academic performance issues, has other concerns in terms of financial or governance concerns, can place a school on probation per the terms of the contract, where there's a certain performance period or certain measures that have to be put in place in order for the school to continue to operate. And if those aren't met, then the contract can be terminated earlier, and there's a state-defined process for how an early termination can look. But obviously, the primary way that schools are held accountable is through the renewal process. But there are avenues, through the terms of the contract, through a probationary period or other measures that can be put into place prior to that renewal period.
Is with the state authorized charter schools, aside from us not getting that count, that FTE, are there other things that we as a district owe or to the state charters, like that relationship?
That we as a district owe to the schools themselves?
Yes, see, I know that we our relationships with our authorized
Right.
partners are one thing. I'm just curious about the state authorized charters, what our direct relationship is with them.
From a kind of contractual perspective, it's none. Those state charter schools are their own LEAs, and so they're totally separate and apart from Atlanta Public Schools. There's no obligation to provide them with any facilities. There's no obligation to provide them with any support or resources. We get phone calls from parents who are upset at their state charter school and think it's an APS school, and we redirect them to the State Charter Schools Commission, and that really is the extent of the district's interaction with those schools, currently at least.
And they clearly can cross districts because we've got something in South Fulton that you said also impacts Atlanta city residents as well.
That's right, yeah.
Okay.
The state charter schools can have an attendance zone that crosses district boundaries, and most of them do.
Excellent, thank you.
Board Member Brooks.
Thank you. Thank you so much for the presentation and the transparency on so many matters that I think are worth looking at. Question for you: How many times has a underperforming charter come before the APS board and been renewed?
How many times is an underperforming? I guess.
Correct.
How are we defining underperforming? Like not meeting all the goals? In
Not
the
meeting the
contracts?
goals that were set out upon the crafting of their charter.
I would have to go back to look prior to when I started in this role. Since I've been in this role, any school that has not been meeting all of the terms of its contract has been either renewed conditionally, like Kip and Centennial that we mentioned before, where the school remains on that state list, the charter could be terminated early, or the most recent one with the Condesi schools, just the extension with a conditional period for the next state recalculation. So in the past 6 years, I would say none. And there have been charter schools whose contracts have been terminated, have not been renewed. Not in the past 6 years. I think 2014 was the last time a charter was not renewed. But there have been charter schools that have existed in APS and have closed due to not meeting those goals.
And so I guess what I'm trying to get at is having a better understanding of what is the ratio of charters that are underperforming, that are coming for renewal, that we are continuing to renew, as opposed to not renewing. Do we have any idea of where we are within that batch?
Yes, so all of the charter schools on this slide here, so these are the charter organizations, and some of them operate multiple schools. Outside of the three charter operators that I just mentioned before, the other charter schools, when they have come up for renewal, have all been meeting their performance standards at the time of renewal and have been renewed. So 3 out of the 8 charter organizations have met all of their performance standards at the time of renewal.
Right. And so has a charter come before us at the time of renewal while not meeting academic expectations or goals?
Yes, the 3 I mentioned, KIPP, Centennial, and Condesi, and those were granted a conditional renewal in the case of Centennial and KIPP, and just a 2-year extension to the existing contract for Condesi.
Do we have any data on the impact, the academic impact on our traditional schools that our charter schools have? Or have we followed upon the opening of a school, the closest neighborhood school, the outcomes have moved in this trajectory or otherwise? Are we quantifying that impact?
To my knowledge, there hasn't been that sort of a study that's been conducted, but certainly I think something that could be explored.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions? I'm hearing none. We may move on to the next presentation. Thank you, Mr. Underwood, for
Thank
your
you.
presentation.
Dr. Love, we're ready for an update on exceptional education.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Okay. Yes, you may continue.
Good afternoon, Board Chair Mitchell, board members, and Dr. Johnson. I am Dr. Shatina Love, Interim Assistant Superintendent of the Department of Exceptional Education. I'm proud to share the progress, challenges, and forward vision of our department because we are excited to be exceptional. I'd like to begin by providing a brief overview of the number of students we serve. We have experienced an increase in students over the last 3 years. At the October 2024 FTE count, our student with disability enrollment was 5,980. As of April 2025, we serve approximately 6,100 students. This could be a result of new identification or out-of-district transfers. 12% of our district's student enrollment are students with disabilities. According to the Center for Educational Statistics, the state average is 13% and the national average is 15%. Here you will see enrollment by exceptionality. The exceptionality with the largest enrollment is specific learning disability. Likewise, we have seen steady increases in identification of autism and other health impairment, which includes attention deficit disorder, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, and other medical diagnoses that interfere with students' learning ability. Again, the increases align with national increases of the same exceptionalities, according to the Center for Educational Statistics. We offer over 115 classes serving students ages 3 to 22, including programs for those who are deaf and hard of hearing, as well as students with intellectual disabilities, autism, therapeutic, and behavioral needs. The next 3 slides will show the number of students at each grade band by school. Although Brandon serves the largest number of students with exceptional needs in the district at 103, these students represent 11% of the total population of approximately 908, which is slightly below the district and state averages. Similarly, Sutton Middle School has an enrollment of approximately 1,600 students, with 213 students identified as students with disabilities, which closely aligns with the state average of 13%. North Atlanta High School has an enrollment of approximately 2,300 students, with 263 identified as students with disabilities, representing 11% of the student body. In comparison, Douglas, Mays, and Washington have a significantly higher percentage of students with disabilities at 19, 16, and 17% respectively. We are closely monitoring academic performance of our students. The Georgia Milestone data shows the content mastery achieved and improvement targets set by the Georgia DOE. This includes developing learners to distinguished learners. In 2024, the Student with Disabilities student group met or made growth in all target areas as a district. Students with significant cognitive disabilities who are unable to participate in the Georgia Milestone assessment system, even with accommodations and modifications, are assessed through the Georgia Alternative Assessment. These are typically students with exceptionalities of severe, profound, severe, profound or moderate intellectual disabilities, and some with autism. The majority of our students assessed through GAA achieved at a level 3 or above, with our highest performance at middle school. It's important to note that in elementary school, students are still learning the systems and expectations of school while still being taught grade level standards with modifications. At high school standards are more rigorous with modifications. Courses that students take include Algebra 2 and biology. The Spring MAP assessment from 2024 to 2025 reveals encouraging progress, with a notable increase in the number of students advancing from beginning level to developing and proficient performance levels. Our financial investment has grown in the past in response to the rising number of students with disabilities and the increasing intensity of required services, a trend consistent with national patterns noted by Edunomics, which highlights how exceptional education spending continues to outpace overall K-12 funding due to growing student needs and service mandates. We have seen a 9% increase in expenditures from 2024 to 2025, primarily driven by staffing needs to support the growing demands of exceptional education services. Progress requires a clear understanding of the past. The behaviors and decisions of adults play a critical role in shaping student achievement and outcomes. Feedback from schools, families, and external stakeholders has highlighted the urgent need to closely examine departmental practices. The history of mistrust prompted an internal audit of the identification and referral process, IEP development, and staff training. The audit revealed gaps in compliance, consent procedures, documentation, and training. The findings were critical. 5 of the 8 were identified as high priority. In response, the MTSS, Exceptional Education, and Psychological Services teams engaged in strategic cross-collaboration to address identified areas of growth and ensure aligned data-driven improvements. To date, 6 of the 8 are completed. The following 2 are in progress. In response to finding 2, FastBridge, an intervention and monitoring tool, has been approved and purchased. The cross-functional team, led by the MTSS coordinators, are working to complete the training and implementation plan to begin this summer. In response to finding 8, we are in the final read of our Policies, Practices, and Procedures Manual to ensure clarity and minimize the opportunities for misinterpretation. This will continue to be an ongoing process as the Georgia DOE continues to provide updates and suggestions for correction. The department identified 3 priorities to lead our work: compliance, instruction, and community. Significant strides have been made to align practices with district, state, and federal regulations. The department has seen a measurable improvement in compliance metrics, including an increase in initial evaluation compliance from 94 to 97%, and a reduction in late IEPs of 40%. Since September 2024, over 150 IEP reviews have been conducted to ensure alignment and accountability. These reviews have informed targeted professional development for our lead teachers. In addition, all principals were reoriented with current policies and expectations in October 2024. The department continues to strengthen oversight through monthly monitoring of exclusionary practices and late IEPs, ongoing cross-functional training, and structured communication with our cluster superintendents. In tandem with compliance efforts, the department has prioritized strengthening instruction for students with exceptional needs. Central to this initiative has been the expansion of professional learning and school-based support. The department has facilitated over 40 SDI or specially designed instruction trainings, participated in the Coaching Academy in partnership with the Office of Teaching and Learning, and embedded inclusive practice specialists into school improvement planning. Collaboration with state and regional partners, including the Georgia DOE and Metro RESA, has enhanced the quality of support delivered. Targeted walkthroughs in schools designated as ATSI or TSI have led to measurable progress, with 9 of the 11 ATSI schools showing improvement according to the Georgia DOE observation rubric. Through training on assistive technology, high leverage practices, and a multi-tiered support system, the department is equipping school teams with tools to better serve students in inclusive and specialized settings. Instructional practices must improve to reduce the number of state-identified schools for monitoring and improvement. The increase of TSI schools from 1 to 10 has been based on the performance of our students with disabilities, which is a paramount concern. Rebuilding trust with families and community stakeholders has been a foundational pillar in the departmental's re-imaging efforts. After years of strained relationships, the department is prioritizing transparency, access, and meaningful engagement. Multiple initiatives have been introduced to foster improved communication, including the launch of a monthly newsletter, updates to the department's website to include real-time parent feedback, and the continuation of our Parent Cafe, circles of adults focusing on education. Stakeholder sessions have also been held to gather input and share updates. Beyond family communication, the department is partnering with the Atlanta Public Schools Police Department for future training and is exploring collaborative training opportunities with the Office of Employee Relations. Additionally, we are collaborating with the Department of Transportation to provide training to bus monitors to ensure safe and supportive transportation environments for our exceptional students. These efforts reflect a deliberate and sustained commitment to reestablishing credibility, connection, confidence across our communities. In August, the department's name shifted to the Department of Exceptional Children. While the title aligns with the Georgia Department of Education Division of Exceptional Children, it recognizes students who who have some area of functioning that is significantly different. Exceptional education is inclusive of students with learning differences, physical challenges, and those with special gifts and talents. We continue to be reflective of our family engagements as the Parent Expo, such as the Parent Expo, to ensure we are meeting the needs of our intended audience. We are intentional in our planning for professional development for all exceptional education teachers, paraprofessionals, and administrators, continuing with our Exceptional Educator Summit in July and the development of a professional learning series grounded in data. We are dedicated to the actions of creating a positive experience for students and families as we review and redefine our regional and specialized settings. While this has been a comprehensive review of the work this year, what lies ahead, our approach remains responsive. Feedback from school supervision, key stakeholders, coupled with our own observations, have reinforced the need for targeted support in schools of concern. This focused effort is already underway. This week, 13 team members began reviewing 110 IEPs at a specific school and are developing a school-specific data action plan for that school specific directly. As we highlight the work of the Department of Exceptional Education, we are focused on the path ahead because we are one district with one goal, every student, and we are excited to be exceptional. This concludes my presentation.
Thank you, Dr. Love. Do we have any questions from board members? I'm gonna start down here. Board member Jessica Johnson, board member Brown, and Brooks.
Okay, sorry. Thank you, Dr. Love. I first just want to applaud the huge progress that has been made as a result of the audit findings. I know that it was a heavy lift, and so just kudos to you and your team for specifically leaning into that work the way that you all have. I guess my question is around, we've been doing these kind of community events. One of the themes and issues that has come up has been the reevaluation of families and that timeline. And if you could just speak to a little bit about what that work is looking like for you all to address the reevaluation, and then just also an update on the timeline from the initial assessment and identification to actually being able to set up the IEP meetings. That would be helpful just to, if we have an idea of what that timeline is now.
So from the initial evaluation process, we have 60 days. Once a parent gives consent, we have 60 days to complete the evaluation process. At that point, after that 60 days, we should be able to have completed all testing, and a student, we have a determination meeting at that time for that student. And right now, we're at 97% of completing those initial evaluations. You also asked the question around our redeterminations and reevaluations. We know that has been an ongoing and echoing concern. There is a little to that because not always is a redetermination required, a comprehensive redetermination required. However, they should be done at least at each grade band of a student, so at the elementary to the middle to the high school. We've noticed some opportunities where, without looking deeper in having specific data, we've noticed some opportunities where we can lean in a little differently in some schools so that we can have those intentional conversations as students are noticing academic challenges or behavioral challenges to say, like, does this child need to be, to have a comprehensive reevaluation for determination. The school that we mentioned, that I mentioned without naming the school, is one of those schools that we are leaning into to look specifically at the timelines of redeterminations and reevaluations, IEPs in totality to understand, are they comprehensive, are they fully operational, and then developing the plan. Again, we want to make sure that we have the specific data to be able to look at to create that plan to support the school and those students.
Thank you so much. And then just curious if you had any, if you could share out, I was looking at the slide on content mastery, and I know we've been leaning in really heavy in literacy and numeracy, but the science and social studies, we're just wondering kind of what does the work look like there to make sure that our students are making progress?
So that is an area that we would definitely want to continue to look deeper into. A lot of times that looks at how are we layering in some of those literacy and or math skills into that area. We would have to understand who those students are, how they're being instructed, and how much time they're receiving instructionally around standards mastery. I think it is an area that we can continue to look into broadly. While literacy is our focus, how do we, again, layer some of those strategies and skills into those content areas for support?
Thank you.
You're welcome.
If I could just add, I think, no, Bella could probably speak this better than me, but probably some systemic opportunity in those couple of spaces. And I think specifically when we talk about curriculum, obviously we've leaned in, appreciate the board's leadership around the literacy adoption. We have some work to do in math. Explicitly, as I meet with cluster superintendents on a weekly basis and get a feel for what's happening in schools. There was resources that the district had adopted and implemented. Then I think early in the year, those resources were pulled back, and then we would try to put them back out. So some stops and starts. I know Dr. Butler's in the process of, and that team is of evaluating that resource for math and making sure that it aligns. There's some standard alignment opportunity, I think is probably the best way to say that, that we need to make sure on our end that provider does as a byproduct of what the district agreed to a couple of years ago. In addition to that, though, science and social studies are going to be areas that systemically we have to lean into. So as we go through curriculum guide development and look at assessment alignment, I think what you're seeing in exceptional education is a microcosm of probably a more systemic issue or systemic opportunity that will lead into as we work through, in particular this summer, getting things really, really tight.
I want to go back to, it's slide 18 on my presentation. It's the one about our priority community. I think it's like 2 or 3 from the bottom. That one.
Yes.
A lot of the concerns that we've heard raised at our level over the years involve responsiveness. And so thank you for focusing on that. And I do think it's beginning to get better. But what, and the more specific you can be in your answer to this question, the better. What specifically are we doing to retrain both administrators at the departmental level and down to the principal level to change their mindset, to change their responsiveness, so that we get away from what a parent described to me a while back as a culture of no, instead of a culture of yes?
Thank you. I think although a general answer, I think it's still specific. We at the district level are in service to our students and our families and our schools. And so there has been a very clear expectation, not necessarily training from a district space, but an expectation around responsiveness in a 24 to 48-hour response to our parents. And in doing that, to our parents and our schools, and in doing that, we are looking for how do we get to yes within the parameters that we have. And so to your point, I have heard that there has been a culture of no, but that's not the work that we're here to do, right? We serve students who have very specific needs. Part of that work, though, has been specifically working through our policies and practices and ensuring that our practices align with our policies. And so where that culture of no came from individual practices, uncomfortableness maybe, or mindsets, but when we go back to our policies, practices, our policies and procedures manual, in most instances, there is a way to work through that problem. And so it's been a lot of redirecting, not just school staff, but also our district staff back to our manual. What does our manual say? What do our district policies say for us to work through whatever situation that we have for our families and/or schools? Again, part of that work was reorienting our school leadership in October to our disciplinary policies that we have in place, especially when it comes to discipline and out-of-school or exclusionary days, to understand that we do have a standard operating procedure for suspensions, that we do have a problem-solving practice. So again, a large part of it, to your point, is shifting mindsets, but then going back to documents that we already have in place and utilizing those documents instead of the arbitrary no and we can't do.
Are there policies that, that you see that we need to look at for policy revision? And I ask that as a member of the policy committee.
I think there is an opportunity for us to take a very intentional look at what our state regulations say to see how we are closely aligned or following, ensuring that we're following through with those as far as our policies are concerned. There's nothing that stands out directly, and in working with the Georgia DOE, when we do have conversations or if they're giving us responses or resolutions, they're often small or minor things, practices that we weren't doing and things that we need to be more specific about. So again, nothing stands out in the moment, but I think there is an opportunity as we continue this work to look specifically and ensure there is alignment.
And if you find anything, if you would please let Erica Long know, or Board Chair Mitchell, or and as well as Superintendent Johnson, so that we can make sure that we're helping you.
Yes.
And one more quick one. My understanding is that several months ago, there was a conversation between Dr. Johnson and some parents, and one of the things that that they discussed was a need for paraprofessionals who have certification in specific areas of exceptional education. So training in autism, training in learning disabilities. They felt like there was some enthusiasm and some forward movement around that idea, but I don't know that they've seen any movement since then. Is that something y'all are still working on, or has that gone by the wayside?
It has not gone by the wayside. At our February 17th and our March 17th professional learning days, we did provide autism training, which is not, although the trainer that we had is autism specific, she trained on behaviors and responsiveness and how to interact with students with disabilities. While it was focused on autism, it's definitely transferable to the other areas as well. What I think we can also, and that is an ongoing opportunity for us. Again, we've already had two. We're already looking at how do we continue the learning into next school year and beyond. I think there is also a space that we have not explored just yet around the curriculum supports of those persons as well, and how do we appropriately equip them to be able to support in the instructional area and not just the behavioral space as well.
Can I possibly have one more question? If not, say so. Okay, really quick, I promise. There's a general perception among parents, and admittedly this is anecdotal, but that we have a departure of IEP and 504 students between at the grade bands, that a fairly significant number leave between 5th and 6th, and then again between 8th and 9th. I haven't gone through these numbers to figure out whether that's the case. Do we track that? And if so, do we specifically try to figure out why that's happening, if in fact it's happening?
We do not track it. We do recognize that we do have more students at the elementary level who are identified. That's their initial identification. The transition between grade bands, though, we've not looked deep enough to see why they are transitioning out. So I think that is a space that we can look into and maybe even interview some parents to understand why they're leaving.
Like an exit interview or something, just to see if there are trends or common themes that would help us address issues in the future. That's all.
Yes,
Board Member Howard? Oh.
No, I was trying not to confuse it this time, so I was being silent. Okay. Thank you so much for the presentation. I wanted to just acknowledge one of the first things that I noticed, or that I guess I was emotionally moved by being a new board member, was the continued use of SPED department and special education department by the district. And so I just wanted to, again, just reaffirm and express my gratitude for pushing forward the language that we're using in the district by using, exceptional students and students with exceptionalities and just graduating our language. To that effect, I guess for a point of clarification, our gifted students are served by the Department of Exceptional Students, correct?
They are not. That department currently sits within our teaching and learning department or office of teaching and learning.
That's interesting. Okay.
Yes, I think we do anticipate some organizational shifts, though.
Understood.
But where I've been, we're used to gifted being a part of exceptional education, and so understand there's a multifaceted approach we've tried to take. In that the first step has really been compliance and really leaning in, because we had the audit that we were digging into as I think, and Dr. Lewis did a tremendous job going back to something that was stated earlier. And I don't want to water it down, but at the end of the day, customer service is like, which is culture related, is like the number one opportunity that permeated from all the findings that were there. And I'll use this anecdote. Eric Long and I were walking into the state capitol a few weeks ago, and there was a parent. I don't know if it was an APS student or not, but there were parents with two children. One of the children obviously had exceptionalities, and was having a bit of a moment, and the mom was doing a really good job of dealing with it. And I mentioned to Erica going in. I said, we get the opportunity to serve these children for a portion of time. But so many of our parents are dealing with these exceptionalities every day, all day. Yeah. And for so many of the children we get the privilege of serving, they deal with the exceptionality for the rest of their lives. Mm-hmm. And so that customer service component is critical. Gifted will come into, so getting compliant has been first. Feel good about where we're headed. There's still a bunch of work to do in that space, but we're headed in direction. The phase two is to really bolster the quality of instruction. And so as exceptional education begins its pivot to teaching and learning, there's a much more braided approach from the standpoint of curriculum and what we offer, which brings in all this stuff is interconnected, which brings in the quality of and support of our paras, the support of our teachers that are doing the day-to-day, and really the entire continuum. So as we move into next year, some pivots are on the way, and frankly, psychology is an area where, but there's a lot here. The identification, I'm going to say reclass, but I don't want to say reclass. We were just talking about it. The reevals. So much of that happens within exceptional education. So we need to marry all those things together, and we're in the process of that.
Right. No, I appreciate you naming that. I think on the operational side, I mean, obviously that's your wheelhouse. And of course, there's a lot of overlaps in the services that are needed between the two segments of students. I think more so for me, it's about stigma. And so when our Department of Exceptional Students is only related to students with disabilities and not students who are gifted as well, I think there's a cultural consequence to that. So I want to digress on that because that really wasn't the big point that I was trying to get to. But thank you for naming that, because I agree. I think our gifted students and students with learning disabilities should be within one service department if that's the posture of the administration. But to your point about curriculum and curriculum supports, as a special education teacher, interrelated teacher, I teach only co-taught classes. I have been a co-teacher and I have a co-teacher. What I find to be the biggest barrier as a special education practitioner is that you have to be the case manager and the service delivery supplier at the same time. And I think that is completely unrealistic and is the cause to why we don't get better academic outcomes specifically for students with learning disabilities, specifically. Because if, you just talked about it, folks are saying we want parapros that are specifically trained in particular content areas. Well, guess what? Our co-teachers are not specifically trained in specific content areas. So they're doing the best that they can to support, but the facts are in the classroom day in and day out, they're spending the majority of their time trying to make sure they're compliant with paperwork. So they're not actually giving the one-to-one pull-out instruction that you need. They're not actually focused on delivering the services that they're supposed to. They're making the IEP look real good, but when it comes to the rubber hitting the road, there are many gaps being made there because they're stretched too thin. My question to us as a district, and probably more so to Dr. Johnson, and you don't have to answer it publicly, but is there an appetite for us to separate the case management and service delivery requirements for our special education teachers such that we could have people specifically focused on doing paperwork and we could have people specifically focused on servicing our students?
There's an appetite for everything. So transparently, we had this conversation, a little bit of this conversation a couple of weeks ago, cluster superintendent, right before break. And so I think everything is on the table in regards to conversation and how we're looking at things and everything from CELTS to, the entire continuum. But literally, this conversation is one that that we're having. I know the board knows, interview me, hire me, but certified special educator, so I get this area, and the difficulty of managing a caseload and delivering instruction, all the nuance of, being inclusion, and it gets really tough when you get into middle and high school and the content gets more complex and what we expect teachers to do. Sometimes you find a unicorn. I was at, Booker T. Washington a few weeks ago, and the math teacher in there just happened to be, in this particular classroom, you really couldn't tell if you didn't really know. That's how it's supposed to be, but it's few and far between that you get somebody when you get in the middle and high with that level of content expertise. So, again, the integration of teaching and learning will help. Looking at the caseloads is obviously something that we're doing. So check to all of the above. We're not positioned or poised right now, I think, to say definitively anything, but I'll let Dr. Love chime in, but I know we're looking at all of that.
We're looking at all of that. And to your point around content, we've heard the concerns from our cluster superintendents and principals around our staff that don't have both, right? To your point, compliance and or instructional supports. And so we're even looking into how do we support that work next year into some professional learning opportunities, because we do have a number of teachers that are novice and or out of field. So they even need to understand how to support academically when it comes to delivering instruction for our students with special needs or exceptional needs. So sometimes we have teachers that are caught at a negative in both places. And so how do we, as a district or as a department, create the conditions along with our school leaders and cluster superintendents so that they can feel supported and have those wraparound services? Because at the end, again, it's our behaviors, our actions as a department and or an instructional team that will allow our students to achieve. Another thing that we're looking at is how are they engaging with curriculum? How are they spending time in the PLCs and being a part of that work? And how are our lead teachers being equipped to be able to coach appropriately? And so again, they are also a part of our instructional, they're not, we're doing a train-the-trainer model, let me correct that. A train-the-trainer model for our lead teachers to be able to understand how do they coach in those interrelated areas and also coaching for compliance. So it's a lot of work that I also am a special education certified teacher. So it's a lot of work that we sign up for, but I will say that we are here to make sure it happens.
All right, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Board Member Pace.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Dr. Love, for your presentation. Excited about the progress and the work that you and your team are engaging in. So kudos on the progress that's been made to date, and excited about the future as well. Just kind of two questions. One statement and two questions, but wanted to kind of co-sign the exploration of looking at our structure, from coordinators all the way down to our parapros. I think that is definitely something that's been echoed, I would say, certainly amongst staff, but certainly in the community as well, particularly amongst those who are advocating for our students with exceptionalities. To Jessica's point that she mentioned earlier, just in some of our community engagement, one of the things that was mentioned was the opportunity to educate more of our parents of students with exceptionalities. And so I had an opportunity to attend one of our cluster nights, which was amazing. Enjoyed that quite a bit. Certainly would love to see more of our families, out and about. And I know that's, more work that we can do and strategize around creatively how we can do that. But would love it just at some point if you could share with me and certainly with the board as well, just additional info about the parent cafe sessions that were mentioned in your presentation, as well as the parent expo opportunities as well. So just curious as to, kind of what those look like, what's involved. Again, don't have to share it here, but would love to just get some more information at a later time about that. And then kind of final question is around students with exceptionalities that may also be English language learners, and kind of, what that scope looks like. Are we seeing lots of numbers there? Have we put any kind of eyes on that, particularly around professional development, for our staff that may need to kind of, attack kind of both areas, if you will, right? And then kind of taking that one step further, what does our staffing look like around bilingual psychologists as well? So just kind of curious about that.
So bilingual psychologist, I would not be able to answer that question in this moment, but I can get back with you on that.
Thank you.
But when we talk about our duly identified students, our students who are identified with ELL and also with disabilities or exceptionalities, we have recognized that we do have one of our TSI schools that is on the TSI list because of those two student subgroups. I'm working with Dr. Margaret McKenzie. She and I have had intentional conversations around how do we marry or support those students and staff members that fall into that area. And so one thing that we're doing as we look forward, we again have the Exceptional Education Students Summit this summer, and part of that time and part of that work will be dedicated to supporting those teachers, whether they are EL only and if they are EL and students or support students with exceptionalities as well. So again, to your point around like how do we look forward, recognize where we are and look forward, we are doing that work. Mm-hmm.
Vice Chair McDonald.
Hi, so Dr. Love, thank you very much. I appreciate that you are kind of reviewing and revising the IEP approach. And I saw that, and I made a note, so I want to first clarify. Is there a commitment that people will have a response in 24 to 48 hours? Is that the commitment we're putting out in the community?
That is our commitment for if they inquire of us, not necessarily of an IEP, right? It depends on, like if someone calls or emails, our intent is to get back to them within 24 to 48 hours.
And then as far as, the actual development of the IEP, is there a standard in which we want to operate to have those completed and available?
So it depends on what type of IEP or where we are in that process. Again, if it is an initial IEP where a parent has given consent, then we have 60 days to complete the process. If it is a situation where we are reviewing an annual review IEP, then there is an engagement where the parent has to be notified 7 to 10 days prior to. Then we come together in an IEP meeting and we complete the draft or develop the IEP from there. And at the completion of that meeting, then the IEP is in effect.
So as you can imagine, so the schools that have the highest numbers are the schools that are in my part of the cluster, which is why Cynthia's also been hearing about this for longer than me, because Cynthia's been on the board longer than me. But I think it's very hard for a parent who is acknowledging that they need help and seeking that help to be met with frustration. And empathy is free.
Mm-hmm.
So in addition to all the resources that we need and we're figuring out how to help enable, I think overall the feedback has been like, this district is not empathetic to parents who need help in this particular category, and that's simply unacceptable to everyone sitting up here, and surely you and everyone else, or you wouldn't be doing the work. But I think just to make sure that we're always looking at it through an empathetic lens, because I can't imagine, people are just still trying to like knock on the door and get help, and it's just, that's not how we want to service these kids.
I agree. And I think to Dr. Johnson's point earlier around the culture, we are shifting culture and expectation. There is a space, to Chief Long's statement earlier in the year, there's a space for every student within Atlanta Public Schools. And we want to make sure that our parents, as they are in situations, they're living a very human experience, and we are here. We choose to be in these positions to help serve them. And so if there is concerns, I would welcome the opportunity to engage directly with those parents to understand where their challenge is and how I can support them, and then also the school in becoming better at how we service those families.
Okay, because we have this parent group, Atlanta Thrive, that is deeply involved, and Kimberly's at every meeting, and she talks about it, but the need for that group wouldn't be so powerful and need to exist if the families were getting what they felt like they needed from the people that should be giving it to them. So I appreciate that there's advocacy in the community, and I hope that as we continue to review and revise, that we don't need parent advocates helping other parents get what seems like kind of simple, basic things. So thank you very much.
Yes, ma'am.
Board Member Dr. Zeff.
Thank you for your presentation, Dr. Love, but more importantly, thank you for your leadership. The hardest thing to do is to get a tough audit like we got that was direct, and to lean into that and embrace it. And so I just want to publicly recognize you for that, and not shying away and disputing the claims, as I think Board Member McDonald just detailed, but actually saying these are learning opportunities for us. And so I would encourage us all to give you what you need to keep on this path. I think you've laid out a timeline. I think that's encouraging, and this continuous improvement, creating this learning organization, is what's going to be our secret sauce and help us to serve parents better. If you could just go back to slide 8 for a second. This is actually a better news slide than I think. You've got a lot of red there, but the red is old. All the good news is, so I don't know who does your marketing, but this is good news. Right? Nah, I mean, you would think, right? Because every year we've gotten better. We still have a long way to go, but you see the red, you're like, oh, there's a lot of red, but that's in the rearview mirror. But in the last year, in every category, we've gotten better. We have so much further to go, and I encourage us to continue to push aggressive targets. I know we don't have targets for 2025 laid out there, but let's push ourselves for greatness, because our kids need it, and I think we can get there. But just keep up the good work and know that we're paying attention. There's your clap.
That goes to our school leaders and the work that they're doing, but we appreciate that. Thank you.
Board Member Bolden.
Thank you. I too want to have some appreciation, and I want to thank Atlanta Thrive for their advocacy, right, for constantly being in front of us and giving us the truth, making sure that we're aware of what's happening on the ground level. I want to thank Dr. Battle for agreeing, right, in the audit committee for moving forward in this work. And Dr. Johnson, I think this was one of the first meetings that you came to. I'm not quite sure if you were sworn in or not, but I remember you sitting in the back of the meeting and committed to hearing the results of the special education audit, knowing that there was going to be something that you were going to have to pick up and run with. And I thank you for that commitment and taking the baton and running with it. And again, Dr. Love, thank you to you and your team. Again, this was not easy news to have, but it is opportunity. We have made some progress, and I too am excited about where we're going, and I look forward to the next update. And Ken, thank you for highlighting that that the green is where we are, and up from here. Thank you.
Board Member Howard.
Real quick, also want to thank you. I get great feedback about you and the work you're doing, so thank you so much. No, it is a lot, or actually I don't know, but we are learning more as we go. We want to make sure we're here to support you and your team. And then going back to good news, slide 16, 9 of the 11 ATSI schools showed improvement with the walkthroughs. And with that slide and knowing the schools that are identified as ATSI and TSI, I think you mentioned in the slide that showed a list of them that it had gone from 1 to 10. Yes, thank you for that slide. What is working really well? I know you said the walkthroughs, but could you give us just a little more?
Yeah, I would say, again, an intentional focus on the instruction that's happening in our classes that host students with exceptionalities. We do state and we purport and continue to state that our students with exceptionalities are general education students first. And so we want to make sure that they are experiencing grade level expectation and tasks of work. And a lot of that work has been led through our cluster superintendents and our teaching and learning department in conjunction with our inclusive practice specialists and coming in and supporting our teachers. And how do you shift the delivery to be specific to those student needs? And not just our inclusive practice specialists, but also we have leaned in heavily with our assistive technology work and supports this year as well. In understanding that our students who have exceptionalities often have the opportunity to utilize assistive technology. And we've developed through the year an understanding of what that is from low tech to high tech and how it can be infused into our classes. I think there has been a consistent expectation that as we look at our subgroups or student groups, that we won't, if we work with them, then the group will rise collectively. And so as we look at our ATSI schools, we've been in those schools 3 to 4 times this year, providing intentional feedback, providing support through our turnaround office as well, along with our inclusive practice specialists. So I think a cadre of support has allowed for continuous improvement. We're constantly looking at data. We are constantly identifying ways that we can come in and infuse support as well.
Thank you for those specific examples. And going back to Ken talking about aggressive targets, thinking about as we get together soon to reset our goals, like hearing this feedback, hearing what's needed, that intentional work, that support, those individuals and the professional development, that's all things we need to keep in mind that we'll have to support. So examples of what's having the most impact. So thank you for sharing those and for your presentation today and all the work you do.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Love. On behalf of the board, we see the work. Our community is telling us how things are going. And one of the things I will say, we're not getting a lot of phone calls anymore. So you understand what I'm talking about. So we know there's a lot of improvement that has happened since, the June audit committee meeting in 2024. So we see the progress. Thank you.
We have a dedicated team at our district office that is doing the work. They're on the grounds and we're responsive. That's something that we have all leaned into. So our goal is for them to not call you. Our goal is to handle the work prior to getting to your level. But if it does, just know that we are here.
Yes, ma'am. Dr. Johnson.
Can I put you on the spot a little bit? Can you talk just briefly? I got an eye. Can you talk a little bit about GNET units and all, just very briefly?
Sure. So
with the voice inflection.
They're our educational therapeutics support classes. We no longer use the term GNETs because we now intentionally own that work here locally within our organization. And so what we are doing is we have, I think, less than 20 students district-wide that are a part of, that are identified as therapeutic students. And so we have them, those classes that are throughout the district. We have a few at high schools, middle schools, and elementary schools. And those students receive intentional support. There is 1 teacher and 2 paraprofessionals assigned to the classrooms. And so I'm not sure exactly what you want me to say, but that's generally where we are with that work. And we also have social workers that are assigned to support the North End and then the South End units as well.
And this is a new setup, correct?
It is. It is new this year.
Thank you, Dr. Love. Dr. Bracken, ready for the financial update?
All right, thank you. Good afternoon, Board Chair Mitchell, members of the board, Dr. Johnson. Today I'll present 3 topics related to finance. First, I'll provide you with the financials for FY25 for all activities occurring in the months of July through February within the Consolidated General Fund, followed by the recommendation for some budget adjustments. And finally, I'll provide you an update on the FY26 budget development process so far. With the next 4 slides, we'll cover the FY25 financials for the first 8 months of the fiscal year. The financial position continues to be relatively strong. So far, we've collected about 84.44% of total resources budgeted. Local is at 95.44%, state at 53.75%, and other, which includes the Title I transfer in, at 69.08%. We're currently tracking ahead of pace for revenue collections overall as compared to this point in time last year. Last year by March, we had collected a total of 83.71% of total revenue, and this year we're at 86.75%. On slide 5, we see the budget to actual expenditures so far for FY25. We've currently spent 62.47% of budgeted allotments, and spend in all functions is appropriate for this point in the current fiscal year. Slide 6 represents the current spending trend for FY25 against the FY24 trend. By the end of February last year, we had spent 61.83% of our total annual spend. This year, we're slightly ahead of pace at 62.47%. Notably, general administration is spending at a much slower pace than the last year due to midpoint position abolishments and other increased scrutiny around travel and contracted services. School-based functions are spending ahead of pace, primarily due to the increase in overall average salaries. We'll continue to monitor the pace of spend, and detailed financials can be found in Agenda Item 9.2. Slide 7 shows activities for select federal program budgets so far in the fiscal year. Federal Programs is anticipating an increase in spending for the final quarter of the fiscal year for summer programs and professional learning. This increase will be reflected in the upcoming activity reports, along with the third quarter reimbursement request for charter and partner schools. This shows a comparison to the previous fiscal year. When comparing the year-to-date actuals, the FY25% of spend has occurred at a faster pace than FY24, with the exception of Title 4B. As a reminder, title funds have a 15-month period of availability. We have 3 budget adjustments this month. The first is $486,313 increase to revenue and expenditures for transportation for services actually rendered. The next 2 are revenue increases to recognize $2.5 million in additional QBE midterm funds and $3.8 million in payments related to the closing of the Atlantic Station TAD. Details for these adjustments can be found in Agenda Item 6.1. Agenda Item 9.3 has the detailed information report for special revenue adjustments, less than $1 million that have occurred in March. Finally, I'll provide a brief update on the FY26 budget planning process so far. Slide 11 provides the most up-to-date forecast for revenue projections for FY26. Since our last meeting, we've come up on our local revenue to reflect the closure of the Atlantic Station TAD. We have not yet received the QBE allotment sheets for FY26, but are hopeful to have true numbers in place for state revenue prior to tentative adoption. With a nearly 78% decrease in dependence on fund balance, this revenue projection provides a much more sustainable outlook for the district's financial position. Overall, we expect available resources to be up by less than 1%. The current proposed usage of $17 million in fund balance would leave us 12.7% of anticipated expenditures available in reserves. This is below the 15% fund balance target, but above the 12.5% floor established in this year's budget parameters. This slide walks us through the expenditure assumptions so far for FY26. The primary cost drivers for FY26 are ongoing commitments to salary, a projected step increase, and increases to benefits. TRS rate is increasing by 1.13%, or $5.7 million for the rate increase alone.
The state health rates will increase by 7% for certified employees and nearly 20% for classified employees. Traditional schools are up on average 8%, but you can see here the shifts in new funding weights that drove more of the increase to our elementary schools. Charters are up by an estimated 3%, but will be adjusted once we receive the FY26 QBE sheets. We're adjusting the way we're accounting for charter administration and supports, which partially explains the decrease in partner allocations, but also is due to shifts in enrollment projections. The primary focus of this year's budget process has been on streamlining and finding efficiencies within the central office and department budgets. We've made significant reductions across our central office departments, including a net decrease of 187 positions at nearly $20 million. Contracted services, travel, and supplies were also reduced, but all cuts are partially offset by the increase in salary and benefits I discussed. Increases to the department budgets include the full annualized cost of the ERP implementation and a new textbook adoption. The district-wide budget includes an increase of 3% for the pension obligation, but is offset by decreases in stipends. State grants include the ongoing safety and security grant, and utilities is currently projected to increase by $2 million. Overall, the FY25 expenditure budget is up 2%. So this revenue and expenditure assumption will leave us with a budget gap of nearly $24 million. I'm proposing some solutions that we'll discuss in more detail at this Thursday's Budget Commission meeting, which include forward funding the textbook adoption into the current year, getting leaner in some areas where we have some contingencies and reserves for next year. And finally, I'm recommending that we continue to review utility cost and how we charge for facility usage to close the utility gap by the $2 million newly requested funds. With these adjustments, the gap drops to less than $6 million. As mentioned, this Thursday is our April Budget Commission meeting where we'll discuss these proposals and any final gap closure measures recommended for tentative adoption. Also, we will be reviewing all of those budgets that make up the rest of our budget, which is SPLOST, school nutrition, federal programs, and other grants. We have tentatively scheduled 2 budget community meetings in May to deep dive into the budget and receive any additional feedback prior to going into final adoption scheduled for June 2nd. That concludes my presentation. I'll take any questions you have.
Do we have any questions? I'm gonna start here and go back. I read about, okay.
Mine's easy.
Yeah.
So at one of my community meetings, someone had mentioned that the budget dates had been removed from the calendar. So I just want to make sure that these current dates are on the calendar and updated so the community can participate.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
That's correct. And the only thing we removed, we had some BFAC meetings that were scheduled. Our BFAC attendance has been very, very low. We, as we look at how many additional community meetings are occurring with the board on strategic planning, we looked out at some of the other meetings that will be on the calendar around facility master planning. And what we've been doing is pushing into existing meetings as much as possible instead of pulling people for yet additional meetings around BFAC. So, but we are continuing to meet with Go Teams, CATS, all the available meetings that are on the calendar we're pushing into.
Excellent. I just want to make sure that it's very clear on our website because not everyone who is interested in this conversation are getting direct correspondence from the district.
Okay.
Thank you.
Board Member Dr. Zeff.
Thank you for this, Dr. Bracken. Just a couple quick questions. It looks like we got about 45 days left in the year. Are we projecting where are we going to end up? It sounds like we're ahead in revenue, but there's some other expenses swirling around. Where are we going to end up?
Yeah, so these financials are as of February.
Okay.
So we always are presenting to you a month in arrears because we are closing the previous financial month before we are running our report. So you'll see in a couple of weeks where we've closed out March. We're still trending very comfortably for April. I've asked my budget team to pull together for me a final quarter analysis just so we can see how we're trending on pace for our primarily our average salary spend and benefit spend, where we know we're ahead of pace and have been all year. But there are also opportunities in there where we are, where we can reclassify some funds to our title grants and making sure that we're optimizing, especially our stipends. So we're comfortable in our ability to manage any overspend. And when we're looking at where we were this year as compared to the previous year, so I update my presentation, and what I was telling you this time last year, the gap is actually much smaller than we were at this point in time for expenditures, and we actually ended up spending about 98% of our expenditures. So we're on pace.
That'll be helpful information as we go into budget, budget commission, knowing where, how much fund balance we actually ended up using for 20.
We won't, I don't anticipate that we're using the full amount of the 74 million. And also, in order to get pressure off of next year's budget, I will be recommending we move the textbooks adoption to the current year. So any cushion that we have, we'll make sure that we are optimizing in the current year.
Not using all fund balance that we promised. That's the weed. You can't bury the weed. People need to know that.
To the marketing.
Right? Back to the marketing.
Back to the marketing.
And I want people to tune into the budget commission meeting, because that's where it's super exciting. So I don't need to get into all the weeds here, but I do have a question. Why 17 million plugged in here at this point? And isn't fund balance the plug that you use at the end? Why are we projecting 17 million now that gets us to 12.7, whatever the number you said? What's the thinking there?
The thinking is that we have access to fund balance, and we're trying to not touch the schools as much as possible in the current year. So we did a deep dive into the central office budgets this year. We made as many reductions as we could to balance the budget from the central office, but not dipping into fund balance as a part of our budget closing strategy at this point would mean that this gap of 23 million is actually 17 million more. I put contingencies on here. There are other things that I've already released. So I've already released the $3 million we held back for signature programs, making the assumption that I will use some fund balance to cover. Also, the $7.2 million in school reserves is still untouched. But at this point, to close that final gap without touching fund balance would mean additional cuts in expenditures. And the central office is where we're looking for any of that final little pinch. Anything else would require us going back to schools.
Well, I think I can speak for my colleagues. That's the last place we want to end up is school reserves after the schools have had a tough budget. I just want to thank you and your team. I mean, 187 positions is not nothing. And so I appreciate the folks, and I appreciate folks throughout this building.
Really hard looks at their budgets.
And so know that that's appreciated. And if it means that we can keep that zero for school reserves, then I think we can sleep a little better. Thank you, Dr. Brad.
If I could just speak to, we want to be clear, we're at 187, 20 million. There's more work to be done across departments. I want to speak to this efficiency conversation at the district office. It's not just about cutting positions. Frankly, it's about becoming more effective as an organization. There's some unnecessary redundancies that exist that frankly create layers of confusion, I believe, for and to schools. And so, not to quote Brene Brown, but clear as kind. And we need to be really, really clear about who's on first and who's on second so that schools understand where the support is. And from a philosophical standpoint, the district office's role is strictly to support schools, community, right? And so, we've got more work to do here. It's quite nuanced, and particularly when you get into the operation elements and you get into some other areas. But again, I want to commend the team that's done the work, and I also don't want to slight or take lightly we know this has impacted folks, and so we're hypersensitive to. It's beyond a number. It's really about organization should operate, and we've got a lot of work to do.
Yeah, I'll put my plug in here because I've had palpitations on getting to the finish line and still having work that we're doing. So we do have a drop dead date as of April at the Budget Commission meeting for what will go into the tentative adoption. And so what you will see in the tentative adoption materials, because we'll commit to still giving you the level of detail that we have given you in the past around the budget materials, the individual department sheets, individual school sheets, but it will be as of April 17th. I have a second drop dead of May 15th for what will be in the final adoption. So as we continue to comb through the department budgets, as we make changes, you will see more change over the iterative processes this year than you have in the past. Typically, by April Budget Commission, I like it baked. And so, but we'll continue to make changes. This will continue to be a process, and we just continue to commit to transparency as we make those changes.
And I do have a question. It's on slide 12, and it go all the way down, and it has utilities. Why are utilities so high?
Yes.
High.
It's a great question.
Yes. We got to turn
Yeah.
the lights off.
Yeah, it's and utilities is lights, it's water, it's a few different categories in there, but yeah, the spend is going up. And so I know our facilities team, we're meeting with them regularly. They're combing through it. They're looking at, they're negotiating. They're really trying to get our arms around the utility spend. And also, I think that we've talked about how can practices change going forward to change what we're spending for utilities, and also just making sure that when we are doing our facility rentals, that we're renting at a rate that is actually capturing what we're spending for keeping our facilities open beyond hours. Because right now there is a little bit of a discount that we're offering, and so we want to make sure that that's being fully fleshed out as well. So, yep, it's an area.
And I would just add, I think one of the things you'll see in this upcoming year, and you can speak to this, is we will look at an energy program. Frankly, like we should be more assertive and aggressive in like turning off lights and some different things, and we need to put some structure to it and some meat around it. But there's some savings to be had just by changing some practices and behaviors that we've already discussed and we'll be leaning into more deeply.
Board Member Howard.
Real quickly, another plug for Budget Commission Thursday. Don't miss it, so we can dig in deeper to like slide 13, and I see utilities review on here. And then, yeah, just to echo my colleagues, the intentionality, Dr. Johnson, you've had and team around shifts to central office to ensure that we are most effectively and efficiently supporting our schools. And thank you for the overview so the public really understands that we are trying to make sure where we are currently right now that schools are fully funded, because we are getting questions as we should, and appreciate GO team members and other members of school communities really continuing to be locked in and asking the questions they should be. So thank you for the thorough explanation you've given based on each individual school and situation and the support. And so glad that we're continuing to do the work here at central office and everywhere else to make sure that we're, I won't say it's low-hanging fruit, but it's things that we can address more quickly than some other things that will take longer. So I think you all have done a great job. There are a lot of moving pieces right now. And understand that on the 17th, there'll still be some changes that we'll make sure we help communicate out to the public as well. So tune in Thursday, noon. We'll dig deeper into all of this. Thank you.
Board Member Brooks.
Thank you. Man, the utilities conversation just kind of hit me. Thank you for pointing that out. There's a school district in Arkansas called Batesville, a smaller district. However, what they did was they put micro farm solar. They're micro farming solar on their school sites. And what that allowed them to do was actually bring in millions in revenue, and they were able to give their teachers a $15,000 raise across the board because of using solar. I think they said anecdotally, if a school bill was $17,000 a month, the solar reduced the bill to $4,000. Living in a city here where I know we actually have Black entrepreneurs that own micro farming companies in the city of Atlanta, I would encourage us to seriously consider moving towards bringing that innovation into our district, because long-term, we're never going to get around utilities. And I think it's something that we really need to be taken serious as an opportunity and not just a problem. So I'm gonna digress on that point. So that was just something I saw, and I was like, man, I just saw an article about this.
Googling Batesville.
I also heard from you, I wanted to just get some clarification on a couple of things. You said the stipends for teachers, there was potential to use grant funding to support those stipends?
So just as we are, this is typical processes that we would use when we approach the end of our fiscal year. We're just looking at all of our available funding sources, so general fund, federal, making sure we're optimizing our title fund dollars, making sure we're hitting those 85% targets spend for title. It's a little challenging in our district because we do consolidate. So our funds, our title funds, for the most part, are consolidated in with our general funds. And so we're having to start pulling those back apart to make sure we're hitting all of our spend targets and shifting spending between general fund and title to make sure that we are optimizing our title spend, leaving general fund balance on the table if available so that we can be more strategic in how we use that in the upcoming year. So this is our typical year-end process where we're making sure that we're doing that. Stipends is a really good place that we can look, and not necessarily those big districts funded stipends that we're talking about, but professional learning stipends would be certainly eligible for title spend. So it's that scrubbing that we do at the end of year to maximize all funds.
Thank you for that clarification. So again, these are kind of easy yes or no's. We are not spending less on schools than we did last year.
That's correct.
Correct. Okay. Central office is spending less than it did last year.
Very much so.
Correct. And the $100 million deficit is now a $6 million gap that we're looking to close, correct?
Correct.
So I just wanted to summarize for folks. Let's hit on my brother Ken Zeff's energy of making it simple. $100 million deficit that we've been having looming and talking about for the past few months, which has caused a lot of strain throughout the district, throughout even board conversations, is now a $6 million gap. We are not spending less on any schools. We did not cut funding to any of our schools. We have downsized a central office that a lot of people, I believe, felt could be a lot more efficient, right? So I just wanted to lay out to the public that when we talk about the work that needs to be done, it's happening. It's happening. And this is what it looks like. So thank you so much, Dr. Bracken. Thank you.
I just want to add one quick little caveat as we take the lap around of the truth in advertising. To your point, school, because we have this conversation back and forth, because I'm sensitive. Y'all know I'm a principal. And so I'm sensitive to what principals and schools feel. So our schools received, all of our schools received more money, period. But, there's a big but. Like, there have been increases in compensation. There have been, changes in decision making. So those things have put pressures on school-based budgets. So many schools have had to make some challenging decisions. No different than you would any budget cycle, right? But that is a reality that exists. So they don't, even though there is much more, to the tune of approximately $90 million more. One of the other things that I would note is connected to the previous presentation around exceptional education. You heard Dr. Love speak to, what was it, a 9% increase. But when you look at dollars, and please stop me, put the brakes on if I get wrong here, but there's about a $90 million increase in total funding to schools, but about 1/3 of that, approximately $30 million, is to support our students with exceptionalities, and whether that's one-to-ones, whether that's a teacher need in a classroom, a para, whatever it is. And so, yes, to the more for every school, but also there are more constraints, which in turn for some schools feels like more pressure. There is also heavy work to be done. Like, there is another phase to the work. We have more work to do at the district office, and it's challenging because there are some interconnected areas, and we need to make sure that we are really intentional about some of that. The phase 2 to it, to be really honest, has to do with, I'm gonna speak out from the room. We've got 22,000 empty seats in schools.
That's right.
And so we need to lean into that and talk about how we take some steps to, because become more effective and offer our students a more robust experience. You can't do that when you are funding empty seats. Like, these are students that they're not coming to school because they're not students that are actually a part of APS.
I was about to ask if you could be more
Enrollment
explicit
has
about that.
declined over the last decade. And we just need to speak the truth and talk as a broad community about what we're going to do to address that issue. What would APS look like if we were taking our budget and actually using all of it to fund the warm bodies that are in classrooms? And so that's a much more difficult, fragmented conversation, but it is an important conversation that we will begin.
Yep, so I'll just add some clarification because people are going to go tie numbers. The $90 million is apples to apples from when principals received their budgets last year to when they received their budgets this year. So it's January to January for the budget allocations. If you tie these numbers, some things will have occurred during the budget process last year, but what principals received, what they felt January to January was $90 million more. So I just wanted to clarify that. The balanced budget does include $17 million of fund balance, right? So that $100 million, still also, we're not 100% down to zero. The goal is by next year, by FY 2027, that is also at zero and we are fully balanced. And by 2028, we're starting to restore fund balance back up to our 15% targets. So the work is not at all done. But yes, a lot of hard work did happen this year, so I appreciate the kudos for that.
Yeah, we'll just say one more time. I think going from 74 million in fund balance
That's a 78% decrease.
to 17 roughly million of fund balance is a positive direction.
Thank you, Dr. Bracken. Now it is. Okay, so moving right along. South G. Now it's time for us to engage in the board goal monitoring for our progress towards Goal 3, Profile of a Graduate. Previous board report explored each of the 6 profile characteristics of 12th grade students. In this board report, we will present interim goal 3.1, the percentage of elementary school students, and interim goal 3.2, the percentage of middle school students making progress towards the profile of the graduate characteristics in the 2023-2024 school year. I would like to take a moment to review the norms and expectations for the monitoring session. As Dr. Johnson takes us through the monitoring report, he will discuss the district progress towards meeting interim goal 3.1, the percentage of elementary school students making progress towards a profile of a graduate will increase from 75% in May of 2023 to be announced, or to be determined, in May 2026. Interim goal 3.2, the percentage of middle school students making progress towards a profile of a graduate will increase from 67.4% in May of 2023 to be determined in May of 2026. Board members' comments, questions will be focused on create an engaging dialogue with the superintendent. What are the factors that led to the current levels of achievement? Did the district make progress towards the goal? Why or why not? What strategies and resources worked well or did not work well? What changes and adjustments needed to be made? Will the district require additional resources to meet this goal? What supports do you need from the board to be successful? Please hold your questions until Dr. Johnson has had a chance to walk through the entire report. Okay. Board members, comments and questions should not be evaluative, be technical in nature, tell the superintendent what to do, suggest administrative actions. Reference data that is not in this report. If we stray away from our norms and expectations, I will remind us of these norms and expectations and ask you to rephrase your question or comment aligned with our norms and expectations. Dr. Johnson, please walk us through the monitoring report.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm going to be fairly concise with the first few slides of this presentation. because I think the energy should be around the noticings and kind of the next steps. This profile was developed and adopted. You can move to the next slide. This profile was developed and adopted several years ago, and obviously we're in the strategic planning process, and I think there's an opportunity to have broad conversation about whether this is something that is soft-geable, if we will, or not. And so I think we should have that conversation as we kind of go through the process, because you see some redundancies within here. And I think that there's, in particular, as we kind of move through what areas are there. But we see self-directed and goal-oriented, self-reflective and globally connected, fully engaged learners, academically prepared, resourceful and driven, critical thinkers, and skilled problem solvers. When you look at, next slide, when you look at the goal for 3.1, 76% of fifth graders make progress towards the profile of a graduate for interim goal 3.1, which looks at elementary students and specifically fifth graders. If you look at the next slide, year over year change, these are the areas, and this kind of speaks to some of the things that I think we should really converse about as we continue through the strategic planning and goal making process. When we look at ELA milestones, like a lot of these are things that we are already measuring, and I have some wonderings as to what extent it's there. But you see some up and down, and we'll talk about some of the noticings, in particular point outs that I think are important. But when you look at each of the categories, here are the areas that are within the categories and how the district students perform comparatively from 22 and 23 to 23 and 24. When we go to the next slide and we look at eighth graders, in particular, making progress towards the profile for eighth grade, we see a bit of a decline, about a 0.3% decline. Yet again, when you go to the next slide and see what's underneath the numbers, you can see there's just some up and down movement. And, again, I believe when we look at these kind of things, clarity is important. And when we talk to, the community and our students, our families about what we expect of an APS graduate, I want to make sure that it's something they can grab hold of and it's really, really clear as to what we want in a graduate. So that takes me to noticings. We are seeing, some increases in quantitative metrics and some decreases, frankly, in the qualitative metrics. And there's some questions as to whether or not that has to do with the right size of the two. For instance, in fifth grade ELA proficiency, we see a 42% proficiency rate, which is an increase of about 6%. And in fifth grade ELA, we see a passing rate decrease of about a 0.3%. Kind of similarly, with eighth grade attendance, we see a 66.4% proficiency rate, which is an increase of about 4 points. But then in the looking forward to school conversation, we see a decrease of about 4 points to 65.3%. There are significant increases in proficiency rates, eighth graders entering high school credit and attendance. But there remains a gap between proficiency and course passing. And so there's conversation kind of still to be had. So the next steps and wonderings are kind of what I began to allude to, right? As we look at strategic planning, kind of next steps. As an example, should we really be focused on, and not necessarily as a goal, but as a key performance indicator, potentially an area like attendance, right? That's something that we should call out, I believe, in regards to our key performance indicators. I wonder, these are all kind of wonderings, should we really streamline the language around our profile, right? I don't know if we gave a quiz to all, to everybody that attends Atlanta Public School, and they're like, if they would actually be able to articulate within reason, I think people can, but I think we should be really, really clear with whatever that language is, and we're getting some good push and pull. I know Travis and team, we're getting some good push and pull as we're having these strategic planning sessions about the language that we use and what is representative. So I believe that's a real conversation. The other thing I would lift is how we embed the graduate of a profile. I think I wonder if the graduate profile isn't more of a value statement or our beliefs versus because we're measuring. Like I don't want to steal any thunder, but I'm certain the board's going to measure me and the district on math, on English, and on probably something college and career focused. That's kind of the three legs of every K-12 school system stool. And I'm sure that those three things will be there. When we talk about this profile, whatever the language is, I wonder if there's room within our report cards for the framework, the language to be more deeply embedded, because this is a belief statement, and kind of the same as we look at embedding that language in things like our AMP-UP survey, et cetera. So again, a lot of good information within the profile of a graduate. I think a lot of really strong ideas and definitely lays a foundation for us to kind of take this next step as we go through strategic planning and really start to think about some of that work. So I will yield to questions.
And I just want to say something. I do agree with you when we look at the language around the profile of the graduate. When we developed the profile of a graduate, I believe it was Aretta, me, and Cynthia was here, and that was back in 2019. It was 2019, and now here we are in 2025, and I do think it's time to have a conversation around those characteristics. Yes, Cynthia?
I would encourage us not to eliminate it altogether.
Oh, no,
However,
we're not doing that.
Because I think what we were trying to get at on this particular goal was what are commonly called soft skills, are more, we talk about self-directed, globally connected, service-oriented, but some of those measures that are not necessarily academic. Maybe you're right, and we need to figure out how to tease out some of the qualitative versus the quantitative. I think we're doing a good job of measuring the quantitative aspects, the specifically academic aspects, in our goals 1 and 2. And so maybe this one actually needs to be less quantitative and focus on some of those soft skills and develop really strong measures for those skills, for those characteristics that we want our graduates to have.
Correct. And I will also say one of the things that with the student outcome focused governance is what students are able to do and what we would like to see them do, but also when they leave Atlanta Public Schools, are they prepared for the world, whichever career or college or military, whatever direction they go into. And I think that's kind of where we need to start with. But that could be for another time. So I know there's questions around the monitoring report. So I will start, I'll start on this side and work my way down. Board Member Brooks, and then Board Member Baldwin and Howard.
Thank you. I guess one of my biggest questions, when I look at the profile of a graduate, I would want to know, well, what have our graduates done? What percent of our graduates are completing college? What percentage of our graduates are purchasing a home within 5 years, 3 years after graduating college? What percentage of our students are going on to be entrepreneurs? What percentage of our students are staying in the city bounds of Atlanta or leaving? Like, to me, that's the quantifiable stuff that actually matters. Like, what impact is Atlanta Public Schools having to preparing students to make Atlanta better? I don't see a way to be able to quantify that. I would offer, I didn't think about this, but bringing up the idea of attendance perhaps being a standalone goal by itself, I would push it even further and say that attendance and engagement, because this does kind of hit on the engagement piece, but it doesn't quantify what percentage of students are enrolled in extracurricular activities, what percentage of students are enrolled, are a part of a team, what percentage of students are receiving tutoring after school. We're not quantifying the stuff that gets you the outcomes. So I'm gonna digress, but I just wanted to like put that out there that I'm looking around and I'm like, okay, this feels good for somebody probably, but it's not helping us make students better. And I'm wondering when we're gonna focus on, like, I don't know, what we're here for.
Board Member Baldwin?
So I definitely look forward to streamlining this and having a good way to measure it. I think one of the biggest challenges we had is we had the desire to see this work, but when we created the goal, there were no measurements, and we had to challenge the person who sat in your seat to figure out how are we going to measure this. So I believe we're headed in the right direction. It's just now the question of what do we measure and how do we measure it, because there are two important things. One, where do you have a plan? And then are you prepared for your plan? Thank you.
Board Member Howard?
Yeah, to piggyback off of what Aretta said, and I appreciate the work the team has done to create these measures. I mean, it was exciting that y'all started there, but then we've seen how much it was, and I'm glad we're recognizing we need to pull back and hone in so we can really monitor and measure and create indicators that show us how our kids are doing when they leave us. And you talking, Dr. Johnson, about being enlisted, enrolled, and employed, like that's resonated with me. And I think about our college and career preparedness goal. I'm not saying do away with this either, but for the work session, we don't have to have 4 goals. We can talk about that more later. But it's exciting to be at this point that we have data we've collected and we've seen, like, to Shivy's point, you know, what is this really telling us? Telling us what we really need to know and how we best prepare students. And then I'm curious, Dr. Johnson, just, you know, getting the information you've gotten from the sessions that we hosted around goal resetting and then strategic planning. What have you heard around having curriculum that teaches life skills? Like, we keep hearing from students, they want that. And I think about that with this goal. I'm curious your wonderings around that.
Yeah, I'm gonna put Travis on the spot here. Come on up, Travis. Nobody's got put on the spot today, so Travis, first one. Life skills has come up quite a bit, and I think our students are very intuitive. Like even as the world turns and artificial intelligence and all the things are important, like I think there are those that want to know how to balance a checkbook, like talking foundationally about some things. So Travis, you want to speak to some of that?
Sure. So, board member, superintendent, thank you for putting me on the spot. As I was actually writing more strategic plan back there. If you remember our first round of meeting, or after the superintendent listening session, when y'all went out there was a focus on academic readiness and then life skills. So it was kind of these two pieces that people were interested in. We then went back out and asked, what should we do in order to achieve those things? Like, what does the work look like for schools, for communities, things like that? We then have themed those, and we're out there right now kind of having conversations in April on 2 things. Now you got to prioritize them. Thank you for that list of 25 things in academics and 40 things in life skills. What are the 3 things that if we do this right, then we're doing what's best for kids? That's half of our conversation, and then the other half is some wordsmithing with mission and vision and some of that conversation, which has led to really, really good feedback. Just to give, for our first meeting, because I don't want to say this is what we've heard, period, but our first meeting in April that got to it, life skills were, for example, let me kind of get into, at a district level, people focused on the common priorities were things like mental health and wellness, facilities and infrastructure, and data-informed decisions. On the academic side, what schools should be doing, it was about high-quality teaching, pathways for every student, and shifting from test scores to learning. So those are just some examples of what people prioritized within that laundry list of ideas from back in March.
And that's really helpful to hear. And I just think you know, when making sure students are prepared for life beyond us, like what are they going to need and how are we going to, you know, quantify, is it working, and how are we definitely providing it? So all this coming together right now and getting that feedback, because we're definitely hearing it from students and from adults in the community, family members, and teachers and educators around critical problem-solving skills, knowing just like de-escalation, things of that nature, just things that help us, you know, be even more productive. So I'm curious as we get through this process even more. Thank you, Travis and team, for leading sessions. I've attended many, and there's a lot of great intentionality and engagement. And I like the smaller setting, but we have a work session coming up May 6th, right? We get to dig in even more. And I appreciate the growth, grit, and graduate.
Yeah, and I will go back to something you said there. Like, I think it's a real conversation as the board continues to think about goals. Like the enlisting, enrolling, employed. Like at the end of the day, those are the highest. You know, that's the highest level, right? So you would like to think that if the board's think about monitoring the percentage of students that are, you know, that are APS graduates that are enlisting, enrolling, or employed, right? Like, and that's what we're looking at, that whatever those things up under there are, that we're achieving them at a pretty high clip, because students are poised to be enlisted, enrolled, or employed. Because that's the highest, you know what I mean? Like for us as a K-12 institution, we want to position students to do one of those three things.
Or even entrepreneurships, the 4 E's. The 4 E's.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to throw in real quick. Look, one of the things that the district that will remain unnamed, that I might so happen to work for, was created a Department of Student Employment Services, and that department is specifically tasked with helping students who are not seeking to go to college to be lined up for jobs that there's corporate partnerships with through the district. Moreover, it's also there to assist students who have graduated, who are in college and then are looking for employment, to help them with employment as well. To me, something like that kind of falls in alignment with the what are you going to do as a graduate and how are you going to succeed? So I just kind of throw that out there as just something for us to think about, like what are we doing to Board Chair Mitchell's point, what are we doing to support the kid that's an entrepreneur who can pull out that cell phone and make $100,000 as a high schooler doing something legal, by the way. So you know, what are we doing to support that and normalize that as a district? How are we being innovative in that kind of way and quantifying those wins too? Because otherwise that kid just looks like a kid who didn't go to college, but meanwhile they're doing all right. So, you know, I just want us to make sure we see all of them. Thank you, Board Chair.
Well, thank you. This concludes our work session items for today. Madam General Counsel, is there a need or reason for the board to retreat into executive session?
Yes, Madam Chair, the board needs to discuss personnel and legal matters.
All right. Do I have a motion to enter into executive session to discuss personnel and legal matters?
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Moved by Board Member Briscoe Brown, second by, which one, Board Member Baldwin? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. We'll see you back here at 6 o'clock on the dot.